Welcome back. We're outside and we're talking about vermiculture today. Vermiculture is worm farming and it's a form of composting. And to me, any place that serves food should be composting for sure. And vermiculture is a great way of composting in the wintertime. Sometimes they think it's a little easier, but it just is so much fun for students of all ages. My young adults love, maybe even more so, to worm farm vermiculture, to create this rich compost with worms than even my younger students do. But also the great part about it is that it lends itself to a tremendous amount of science and developing observation skills. I mean, that's a precursor to being a scientist. And so even our youngest primary preschool kids, I think it's a valuable tub to have in the classroom so that they can see that cyclical motion of sustainability happening, where things that sustain themselves kind of can go over and over again, in that, let's say they're harvesting their snack and they're eating it, and what's left is going into the compost bin. The worms are eating it and pooping it out into rich castings, and then they're taking those castings when they're finished and sprinkling it on their garden when they plant the beans for next season or the next planting. So wherever they can be part of that full cycle, it's valuable. Now, adolescents can take this much deeper into the science of biology, or microorganisms, and they can look at things like how much food waste can go through this system in usually 6 months is what this size system will do. It'll depending on how many worms you have and how much food you're feeding them, which is also great data collection. So our junior high or adolescents are becoming the scientists and starting to collect the data that goes into creating some really good education around vermiculture. So our kitchen has a lot of food scraps because they cook fresh food every day. Not all kitchens do that, but wherever you do, this is an easy, especially in the winter when your outside composting systems might not be as available. So I want to just show you, I want to put this book up too because it's a great resource. Vermiculture is the environment of worms and what they need to sustain themselves, which essentially is the same ingredients that any composting system needs. They need carbons and they need nitrogens, they need moisture, and they need air. So those 4 ingredients can be put into this system. And these systems there's a lot of different ones. If you go online, you'll see all kinds of different ones. They have layering ones where the worms move up through, and then you have the finished castings in trays that you can pull out. I find that this system is the easiest for, well, the students that I've worked with so far. And somebody else might argue that, but for me, this has been the best system. So this is simply a tub and I actually did purchase it, but you can simply make them too. You need air ventilation on the bottom and on the top. So the bottom and the top has some airflow. You need a carbon source, and this is where recycling and saving newspaper comes in. So that carbon source needs to be moist. So worms have what we call a 75% moisture rating for their bodies. So what they live in is going to be fairly close to that too. So getting your carbon moist is an essential part of the recipe. Now, you can see I use shredded paper because we have a shredder, but certainly with little kids or young kids that love the work, ripping this is a great part of the project. Now, college kids aren't so into this tedious work, and so I will have it already ready for them. And that's where your age group, the needs of your age group come in. It's different for everybody. What I do too, just to remind everybody, a system this small shouldn't have certain things in it because it's too overwhelming to the system, including citrus, meat products, and even eggshells really don't break down well in this small of a system. All those things can be in a larger composting system if you're really tracking the heat. But in this small system, just to keep problems away, we refrain from that. And I make a nice sign, nice colorful sign that sits on top of it as a reminder for whoever's adding. So we're getting our newspaper or our carbon source, and there are certainly lots of different carbon sources in nature. There's brown leaves, brown grass. Remember, carbon is dead biology. So something that was alive that is now dead will have a lot more carbon in it, and when it's alive, it'll have a lot more nitrogen in it. If we get this recipe just right, our newspaper will be about 75% moist. I fill it about halfway to get started. I'll put a little finished castings from a different bin. I usually have about 8 of these going at once. So some great math involved here too, by tracking the poundage of food scraps that go into these. I think our last time that we tracked one, we had over 250 pounds of produce scraps that went through to create 1 bin of castings. And that is pretty intense fertilizer. So the finished castings are going to look like rich soil. They should be brown, there shouldn't be any smell, and they simply add up as they eat and poop and eat and poop. So in order to get the microbiology, the symbiotic relationships going between the worms and the microbiology, we have to add a little of this. I call it inoculating the carbon. So just adding a little bit back brings in, and this is where a lot of education can happen for the appropriate age group, is understanding that whole soil food web in the ground, because that soil food web lives in your bin as well. So you get that halfway full, you get it inoculated, you add the worms, and you start feeding from your kitchen scraps. We try to use lots of fruits and vegetables so that the finished product will be a super intense fertilizer for our gardens. So we're using the ends of fresh food, stuff that stayed in the refrigerator too long. The more we cut it, the faster it breaks down. Remember, the moisture of fruits and vegetables can be into the 90%. Sorry, my nose is starting to run. So that's going to keep the moisture level right. But if the moisture gets low, adding water, I usually keep a spritz bottle of water around. Worms don't care about decay or about mold or mildew even. They don't even care about pathogens. The miraculous, to me, part of a worm's nature is its ability to sanitize what it eats. So when you're cleaning out your refrigerator, don't think that anything is too disgusting for the worm bin. They love the worst of it. And the more you cut it up, the faster they will consume it, and the more castings, and the more your system is moving and creating more fertilizer for you. This is how we start to create our closed system of fertility. We compost 2 ways here, and I'll show you our regular composting system as well. But this is our small indoor composting system. Now, if we were farther in the south, we could do this in the ground by digging holes and doing it outside year-round, but because we freeze, that's really not an option for us. So what we do, and I do want to sit this up so you can see, is we bury the food. Remember, I did not put the worms in yet, but they could be in here already. We bury it, and that's a really important part, and it's a part that I really have to stress with all age groups. If you leave the food above the carbon, if you don't cover it completely, that's when you get problems. You get visitors, bugs, insects, possibly mice. Worms do not like the light. They will not eat above the carbon or above the ground. So unless you make sure it's completely buried, it will not get consumed, but it will cause problems. Smells as well. So bury it, allow the worms to eat it, and feed them regularly. I want to show you two. Let me just see if I can tip this a little bit. So here is a worm bin that has already, this has been done multiple times. So worms like to stay on top. They like to be in the top 3 inches. So as they consume all this carbon and leave this layer of castings, which you can see under here, and there's some of our friends right now, then you just add another layer, continue to bury it. This had some seeds in it, and they found this environment to be so fertile that they decided to grow, which is not a problem because we can just harvest these and put them on under the carbon as now food. But let's open this up a little bit and see if we can. So whenever we're feeding, we're digging a hole. See some of our friends right here. We're digging a hole. We're covering it up, and when the carbon source gets too thin, the layer's too thin to cover it up well, that's when you add more. So the worms keep coming to the top, we keep feeding under the carbon, and eventually this is not only full, but it's super heavy. But we have all this finished product, and we have enough worms to start a new one. So what I do is harvest worms from one. The best way I've found to harvest worms is to take a peeled apple, put it into the castings, and give them a couple days. Go back and pull out that apple. It will be totally surrounded with worms. And just take the whole entire apple and stick it into your new one and begin the process again. This size container is happy with 1 to 2 pounds of worms. So the first one I might even purchase those worms. There are online sources for purchasing. Red wigglers are the variety that I find are most adaptable to the classroom. Their comfort zone is from 40 degrees to 80 degrees. Most other worms need it to be much cooler all the time. So these can sit out, and they can sit in your garage. A lot of people get a little weirded out by worms in their kitchen. But if you're doing everything right, there's absolutely no smell. And it's one of those convenience things. The closer they are to the source of the work, and it would be food, the chopped up food, the more likely you are to remember to use it and then to benefit from the castings in the end. So these systems will just keep going all year long. And in the spring, when you go to start, I'm just harvesting some more worms while I'm talking to add to this new one. But when you go to start your gardens, you will just need a sprinkle of this. Sometimes I'll put like a tablespoon in each planting hole. But what I really love about it is that whole idea of the cyclical life of the food and the worms and the garden, how it all comes together in relationship. I won't put any more in now, but worms will multiply monthly times 3. So if you started with 1 pound on month 1, I always give them a month to acclimate and to get into their mojo of work. And then think about it as you have 3 pounds by the next, if you're feeding them regularly, which this system would hold about probably at least 5 pounds of cut up produce each week. And you're not, of course, feeding them the produce you should be eating. You're feeding them the scraps, so that we are actually creating this efficient system where there is no waste. That's the whole idea. Now, how does this fit into our microeconomy? Well, worm castings can be sold can be bought and used on houseplants or any other place you have things growing, inside or outside. The juice that often comes off of these, and some of them have little spouts to collect this, is super high nitrogen and does well as a liquid fertilizer, so diluting it's important with water, and again, watering your outdoor or indoor plants with it. So it has a third option of worm cells. So for the fishermen in the family, a vermiculture system also gives them all the red wigglers they need for their fishing. So we have these lined up and we keep them close to where they're used every day. In my classroom, I have a spot under my workbench. It has a rolling shelf where I have like usually 6 of them going at once. And basically I'm either feeding them large amounts once a week, or for classrooms that are making it part of their chore chart, I like to put the day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so that they kind of have a different spot each day to put the food into, in the hopes that, you know, Monday I'll be all eaten by the following week. So depending on how you're using it, my junior high kids just feed once a month. They have, or once a week. They have enough to do one different one every day. So some classrooms just have one for everyday use. Keeping it moist, super important, and out of the sun is super important too. So keep it shaded. 40 to 80 degrees is where they are most comfortable, and just keep the food scraps coming. And the more you chop those food scraps, the faster that cycle happens, and the more fertilizer you have at the end to be used, packaged and sold. It's a microeconomy project. And all the while we're using not only newspaper, but one of the things I like to mix in, I don't like it just to be computer paper because it has a different consistency and it sticks together too much. They need to be able to get through it. So I mix them together on, I like to have more newspaper than the computer paper, but the idea is that we are finding ways to recycle our own waste. And computer paper is a huge waste at every office, and schools do have offices. So cardboard would work too, but what I do find about cardboard is that it is hard to keep moist. It dries up too fast, and then the worms won't engage with it. So keeping it moist is a big part of the recipe for success. And again, vermiculture can be done on so many different levels, in the ground, in very large systems, in small systems, but this is a school-wide kind of practice that can be included that offers every age level different kinds and amounts of science, as well as the practical everyday practice of recycling food waste. And of course there's all kinds of conservation lessons that can go with that too when we talk about where would that food waste go otherwise. The other thing I just want to mention is trying again to label everything and to keep directions clear and available always. And for this one also I noticed I'm missing the scale, but adding some math. You can put a scale in and they can actually weigh the amounts they put in each day. This is a chopper for chopping finely. Knife skills are something we start at about 3rd grade here, and junior high is, continually working on those. So putting all the tools together so that success is, you're making success as easy as it can be. So, any questions about vermiculture? Sound like fun? Yeah, everybody should be doing it. Apartments especially, all that incredible nutrition that is going to the landfill. There's just no reason for it. Farmers need it.
I've seen some people put like food waste, like non-produce waste in their systems. Is this one too small for that kind of?
Well, it depends on what it is. These guys would
put like slices of pizza in their room.
Oh, they will devour starches for sure. So breads, fine. Meats, you know, I think if it's a little bit, it could be okay. But really, we say no meat, no dairy, and that's just because the system is small, and we're trying to turn over quickly. Those are all things that take a little bit longer to turn over. But certainly your bigger compost system can handle that stuff if you're tracking the heat to make sure that your interior heat gets to an acceptable temperature to kill pathogens. What's great about these is there's no temperature monitoring needed, and it doesn't heat. So it's just one of the easiest ways to bring back the minerals to the soil quickly, and it just makes perfect sense. So everybody should be doing vermiculture.